Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bruce Matthews, and I am the Executive Director at the the Association of Consulting Engineering Companies, Ontario. I'm a professional engineer. On behalf of ACEC Ontario, I'm pleased to provide some comments and perspective for this National Engineering Month session, Upskilling to Address Grand Challenges. Engineers are problem solvers by nature. They plan, analyze, design, and support implementation to create a better world. Solving the grand social, environmental, and economic challenges of today requires innovation, driven by design and driven by a thorough understanding of the underlying science. Upskilling is an absolute necessity because of the nature of change. The second law of thermodynamics tells us that change is inevitable, but in the absence of inputs and controls, that change tends toward disorder and chaos. And this is true for physical systems as well as socioeconomic systems. Upskilling is one form of input and control that can alter the natural vector of change. Today's session will look at the importance of upskilling as a means of forging ahead to tackle the massive challenges facing society today. But I'm saying that upskilling is necessary just to hold your ground. One of ACEC Ontario's purposes is to enhance awareness of the importance of continuing professional education and development. An undergraduate engineering degree is a first step to a PEng license. Being issued a PEng license is a first step on a journey of personal and professional growth that never stops. In Ontario, professional engineers have an ethical obligation to act with competence in the performance of their work. Furthermore, they have a legal obligation to undertake only work they are competent to perform by virtue of their training and experience. Upskilling is a key to competency assurance. Some of you may be aware that the engineering regulator in Ontario, PEO, is planning to introduce mandatory continuing professional development for professional engineers next year. So I say again, upskilling is a key to competency assurance. Engineering exists at the intersection of scientific principles and design principles. Our understanding of those principles and the tools available to engineers in applying those principles are constantly evolving. As I indicated earlier, upskilling is a requirement just to stay in the game. Consulting engineers and the firms they work for recognize this. This allows them to continue to be centers of excellence for a broad range of today's challenges. It also fosters resiliency and growth, both for individual professionals and for the firm as a whole. ACEC Ontario is proud to be a champion level sponsor in National Engineering Month. I invite you to learn more about ACEC Ontario and our member firms through our website, acecontario.ca. Thank you. And with that, I'll turn things over to Florent from McMaster University to get the session underway.
Thank you, Bruce, and welcome everybody to this event on professional upskilling. Before we begin, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are coming to you from Toronto, which is in a dish with one spoon territory. We respectfully acknowledge the past and present traditional stewards of the land and their unique role in the life of the region. Toronto is on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. As settlers, we are grateful for the opportunity to live, work, and play in this territory. In Canada, there are more and more discussions and initiatives around professional upskilling. And the challenges faced by many organizations and many professionals like yourself, from a labor shortage perspective, from an upskilling perspective, is the complexity associated with new concepts such as micro-credentials, lifelong learning, and frankly, a huge variety of models and categorizations of skills for the future. And to navigate this newfound and complex world is a very daunting task. And honestly, it is also very confusing endeavor. However, these attributes are mostly tactical actions. And fundamentally, there are foundational and strategic concepts that we need to devote time and efforts to understand. Because they are extremely complex and they interact with an entire ecosystem which is composed of industry, society, academia, the government, and fundamentally the entirety of the province of Ontario in Canada. At a larger picture, there are 4 grand challenges that we need to collectively address and train for. The first one is the impact of climate change on the way we live, the way we work, and our organizations need to adapt to a new circular economy. The impact of the pandemic is just a sliver highlight of this greater impact. The second challenge is the integration of technology in the workplace. And that's particularly challenging in Canada, where we deal with a range of legacy systems. We have a general culture which is adverse to changes. And technology are very complex, and the pace of change is extremely high compared to the rate of absorption in industry. As well, there is an industry-wide lack of adequate and relevant training for lower and middle management. And that's very concerning because this is the layer of management which is in charge of enabling the workforce and also in charge of executing the corporate vision. And lastly, there is a general lack of communication and collaborations between industry and academia. And that's why this event is organized for you, to support you. And we encourage you very much to ask as many questions as you want. Now, I would like to introduce your moderator, Tanuja. She is a warrant officer with the Department of National Defense, and she has trained and developed leaders for over a decade. She's also a mentor on the Industry Operations, Leadership and Management course at McMaster, hosted in the W. Booth School of Engineering Practice. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the introduction. Before we get started, I just want to let everyone know that to put your view, to speak your view so you can see the panelists as we're discussing and providing information. And that if you have any questions during the panel discussion, please feel free to put that in the chat and we will get to it during the Q&A session at the end. You can also indicate that you want to ask a question by using the raise hand icon. So we have 3 guest panelists joining us today to discuss the topics of sustainability, integration of new technology, and professional workforce development. Our first panelist is Joseph, who's the president and CEO of Samsung Controls Inc. and has been in the process and automation industry for over 10 years, with previous roles spanning across operations and sales in Canada and the US. Joseph is a certified professional engineer through the Professional Engineers of Ontario and holds a Master's of Business Administration from the Schulich School of Business. Joseph has experience in sales, marketing, market analysis and growth strategies, business development, engineering, and strategic management while thriving in a highly technical environment. Our next panelist is Bill, who is a geologist and graduate of Queen's University, with 30 years of experience in the mining, mineral exploration industry, industrial minerals, and environmental fields. Bill has worked throughout Canada and has had a number of overseas assignments. He currently manages the sustainability and environment portfolio for Lafarge Canada in Alberta. And finally, our last panelist is Ashan, who is the program lead for McMaster University's Industrial Operations Leadership and Management Program. He is also the founder and owner of the Strong Link, a business that works with industry leaders to design and develop operational competencies. Ashan has led and trained operations teams for over 18 years in the aerospace, defense, marketing and academic sectors with a strong focus on coaching and mentorship. So without further ado, we will start with the topic of sustainability. And Bill, as this is your area of specialty, we'll start with you. As you work in this area with companies incorporating sustainable practices, what have you found to be the most challenging?
I'm not sure if it is actually a challenge or if it represents an opportunity. To me, it's certainly an iterative educational process. It never happens as fast as you want it to, or you would like it to, but you have to just keep chipping away at it. Management and operations often view sustainability as a cost or something that they don't look at as core to their business. So it's getting over that hump. So the challenge is certainly embedding and permeating that culture of sustainability throughout the organization and getting their buy-in. You need the top leadership to set the tone. You need to integrate it throughout the organization and publicly state that it's a core value of your organization. And ultimately, employees, you have to get their engagement. They are going to be the ones that decide if you actually achieve your goals or you don't, because they're going to be implementing your strategies, your processes, your procedures. So you've got to get it through the whole organization. Certainly. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, for that. So what I'm hearing is sustainability being incorporated needs to include every single member of the organization buying into, I guess, the changes in the practices or the use of whatever tools are being brought on.
Yes, that's correct, because you've got to get it through the whole organization. It's one thing to have this lofty goal at the top, but it doesn't come to fruition unless you've got everybody sort of on the same boat and towing the same message and heading in the same direction.
So like a cultural change.
It's very much a cultural change. And again, those things sometimes take a little bit of time to get through. So you just have to keep chipping away at it. It's not a single message that comes out and you stop. You have to revisit that continually, and as with anything, it's a continuous improvement process, and you circle back, show the results that you've achieved, and advance from there.
Thank you, Bill. Joe, on the other side of that, in running a business and having other businesses as clients, where have you seen the impacts of the movement towards sustainability? And has this been a challenge for you and your company to incorporate? Or do you find that your company often is the one offering these options as a practice to clients?
Ultimately, our key activities are driven by input from the outside, demands placed on us by our customers, future developments in the industry, and ideas generated by our staff. I would say in Canada, at least in the process and automation industry, any move to sustainability that we've seen in the past little bit is typically tied directly to legislative changes forcing end users, for example, to adopt more sustainable practices. Without this, I'd say there's a little bit less willingness to change. I mean, no one likes change in the first place. And kind of to Bill's point, where he talked about it's a continuous process. For Samson being a global company and the movement to more sustainable practices, we've definitely had to adapt the way that we operate in terms of production. So our production facilities certainly incorporate sustainable practices in the manufacturing process, where we look at where we can reduce waste, for example, become more efficient in our operations, reduce energy, and along that thought process. We're actually engaged now in a project where we're creating a new, innovative, efficient, climate-friendly plant and office space with state-of-the-art production, which will lead to sustainable, competitive growth for years to come. So sustainability, at least from our side, is core at the decision-making. From a product standpoint, that's also another angle that we can look at it from, where it's driven by the demand of customers, as I mentioned before. A good example is the initiative now to reduce carbon footprint or greenhouse gases in the industry, which is a big global topic, actually. So we have valves, for example, that can be configured to offer zero emissions or predictive analytics solutions that can prevent flare events, which are often one of the leading causes of emissions at refineries. So we're continuing to adapt to meet the needs of clients, as well as making changes on our side to meet the global initiatives.
Thank you, Joe. Ashan, as you work with industry leaders, what do you see as the impacts of the sustainability movement on how leaders have to adapt? And Joe's clearly indicated that's something that they've incorporated as core value, and Bill has chipped in that it has to be a cultural shift from all workers.
Yeah, thank you to Nujan. Thank you to NEM and McMaster for setting up this event. And definitely to echo what Bill and Joe were speaking to, the cultural aspect, as well as the awareness piece. There's three main impacts that I am now seeing from the leadership lens. The first one is that the discussion has evolved. So traditionally, it was really an environmental impact decision. And that has now transitioned into a broader topic of sustainability. So looking at the ramifications, not just on the environment or the immediate environment around infrastructure, but social messaging, the outreach, the customer acquisition, satisfaction, sustainability is touching each one of these points across the supply chain. The second main impact that we're seeing is the amplification of awareness when around the discussion about waste. Exactly to Joe's point, we're seeing the same discussions in the past around lean, or in specifically, we've had recent discussions about water and energy tracking on sites and trying to mitigate waste sources across the supply chain. One other point we've seen is the awareness of off-the-shelf solutions. So managers, frontline workers gaining an awareness of the different tools or techniques they can adopt into their work centers to drive down operating costs, environmental impacts. That has been one of the biggest tools to success. And the last main factor we've seen is the introduction of sustainability KPIs now visible at the shop floor level. And this is really to piggyback on what Bill was speaking to. In the past, we've seen sustainability initiatives at the strategic goals level or the balanced scorecard, but now we're seeing it at the floor management level, where workers, frontline workers, are interacting with the standard KPIs, safety, quality, productivity, and so on. But now we're seeing sustainability KPIs driven right to the shop floor. So I would say it would be within those three specific impacts.
Thank you, Ashan. And I'm picking up that sustainability is something that's, I guess, a bit of a cultural shift that's happening externally, where individuals are demanding it and leadership is taking hold of that and bringing it well within their production lines as the changes going forward and adaptability of companies. Moving on and speaking about those changes, we're going to go to the next main topic, which is the integration of new technology. And so we'll start with Joe on this one. Joe, your company, Samsung, has evolved its products to adapt attributes of big data and additive manufacturing techniques through its smart valve software solutions. So you're obviously a big fan of integration of new technology, and it has worked well for your business. As you work with industry clients, are you finding that embracing new technology is something that is universally beneficial? Or are you finding that not all companies are equipped to effectively incorporate new technology? As in, do they lack the expertise to fully utilize the technology, resulting in it being a big, expensive black box?
So absolutely, I'm a big fan of this digital transition, for us from standalone valves to a more integrated plant utilizing the available data to optimize performance. Generally, what I'm seeing is there's a lag for technology adoption in the Canadian market. Comparing to some of the other markets globally, we're typically, from what I see, 2 to 3 years behind, let's say, the European market. So when these new topics like Industry 4.0 or now even 5.0 are being discussed, many clients don't necessarily know what that means or are at the infancy stages of exploring it. So this is personally why I've really started to work within the industry to promote these new technologies to gain awareness, not only for my company's benefit, but just for the general industry itself. What I'm seeing is that many manufacturers are definitely starting to go this route, promoting these new technologies. However, no customer is going to replace, all standard analog devices, for example, overnight with intelligent devices. But when it comes to new projects or replacing legacy equipment, these IIoT or Industrial Internet of Things solutions might be introduced. The biggest obstacle that I really see from the strategy is that the older generation is and they're set in a certain way of handling things that they understand and that they know. And that's the biggest value that I'm seeing with the newer generation coming into the workforce, where they're going to embrace some of this new technology. So I think that will help the industry evolve itself. Some of these concepts certainly require new departments or skill sets that don't necessarily exist within these companies today. So digital skills, digital requirements, and that type of stuff. Some companies are still focused on doing what works and resisting change. So kind of what I talked about before on the sustainability topic. Therefore, what I'm seeing ultimately is that companies aren't necessarily at a point where they can see value in these large investments, which are typically expensive as well. My company also sells these software type solutions focusing on plant-wide predictive analytics, for example. And when we speak of the concept with customers, the customers generally understand it, but don't necessarily have the personnel in the background to be able to execute it, don't necessarily have the budget to set aside to invest it, or they're trying their own solutions, which involves a much lower level of execution. So I definitely see tremendous benefit in this field, but I think there's a long road ahead.
Thank you. Joe, you brought up a few points that I think flow into for us, Sean, when it comes to new technology and the ability to adopt new technology. You meant redefining the type of industry leader skill sets needed to be successful over the next decade. As Joe pointed out, a lot of these decision makers are in the older generation that may not necessarily understand the technology and the changes coming forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So from my lens, and really to echo Joe's points, there's two main factors we're seeing. There's business owners are looking to see about different digital solutions to solve a problem they may be facing, whether it's a supply chain issue, operations issue, an energy tracking issue, whatever the case is. There's multiple stresses that are triggering a need for a solution. And over the last decade, I'll say, there's been a lot more off-the-shelf or first degree of operation type solutions, which are allowing non-IT based members to try and drive some sort of solution into their business. So that availability is also driving a need for these adoptions. The second factor we're seeing is this transitionary workforce, especially in the last 2 years. That's created an increase in a training demand, recruiting, and retention on a already stressed leadership team within these businesses who are also trying to pivot and scale, adopting digital solutions. So what does that mean for new industry leaders? Specifically, when it comes to integration of technology, we're seeing the skill sets at the frontline manager and leader level increase. So definitely past the traditional office suites or working in cloud-based systems, even task management systems like Asana and Monday, those have now become almost routine. And now the definition's expanded. So utilizing things like Nintex's process automation management software or other solutions at the operations level. So any new industry leader that can share their additional skill sets past those traditional office suite type skills will have an advantage to enable those organizations. The second main skill I'd mention is, aside from the digital skills, is having a deep understanding of how operations run. These businesses are pivoting, they're scaling, they're under pressure. Almost every week we see a new issue that's affecting the supply chain. These leaders need new managers and supervisors that understand what state these businesses are operating in and what they're trying to move to. So you can't be explaining the process and trying to learn a new piece of technology at the same time. So I would say digital skill sets or enhanced digital skill sets and a deep understanding of industry operations.
Okay. So what I'm picking up is a little bit more that I guess instead of decisions maybe being made all the way up at the top, need to enable a little bit more of the middle and lower tiered managers who may be a lot closer to understanding the changes that are required when it comes to integrating new technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Bottom-up decision-making and business case derivation is critical now.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Ishan. Bill, how much is new technology driving industrial sustainability initiatives? And has new technology led the way in offering the most profits when companies seek to be sustainable? Or have you found that changes in practices, procedures, the cultural change you were referring to, can result in a company meeting its sustainability goals without sometimes the investment in costly new technology investments?
Really have to use every tool in the toolbox. You don't necessarily have to have everything that's new, and we sort of go back to that original pain point with adoption and costs associated with that. So again, trying to get that through to your organization. I would sort of echo Joe's comment there that there certainly is a lag in adopting technology, partly because sometimes organizations think it is new and they don't want to be ahead of the curve. They tend to be behind the curve and be pulled along. And also, what's the pain point for most organizations? And quite often that's generally financially. So they're looking at the cost of implementing technology. So it's sometimes hard to get over that initial hump. But if you can drive it down to Ishan's point, to the floor, to the people that are working out there, they know where the issues are. They're walking around the plants. They recognize where the problems are, and putting that decision making down at a lower level within the organization to work from the bottom up, I think is very important. Like, you'll never replace that knowledge and experience of the people that are certainly on the floor with that. And again, you have to measure these things, develop KPIs, track how these things are doing. So when you do put these technologies in place, show how they're performing, and that's how you get them adopted and pushing out through the organization, certainly. Now, there's two parts to it. You can have human fixes where they're just making adjustments and tweaks. The one drawback with that is they're not necessarily permanent fixes. They can fall back off the table. If you've got an engineering solution, then you've taken the human component out of that. So things are automated. They're making adjustments on the fly from an engineering perspective, rather than relying totally on human nature or human habits, which can change.
Okay, so what I'm picking up from what you're saying, Bill, is adoption of a new technology when it comes to sustainability tends to be much more permanent change, as opposed to just changing behaviors or employee behaviors and procedures, which can obviously recycle back to old habits or changes over the years.
That's correct. The one thing with humans is they can fall off the table again and revert back to their old ways.
Okay. So moving on to professional workforce development and collaboration. For this, Ishan, in the current climate, we are facing supply chain challenges, reskilling, transitory workforce, headcount shortages, and an increased rate of disruptions to businesses, as you just mentioned. Where do we focus our reskilling and training initiatives to address these threats to businesses?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Tanuja. It's definitely a very sensitive and important topic, especially in our current landscape of what we're seeing in the news. Almost weekly, I'm having discussions with members that are being impacted in some fashion or have taken measures to strengthen their supply chain. So it's really now trickling down to that leadership and workforce development question. We've identified four main areas. The first one is for new industry leaders, really understanding how a digitized work center or business operation executes. That's a really fundamental skill, because a lot of businesses, whether they're new, startup, or businesses that have been around for quite some time, this applies all the way from small to large businesses that are very prevalent and in the news. We're seeing each one of those cases starting to adopt or transition or strengthen their execution systems. So a new manager, a new worker, a frontline worker or director needs to have a working understanding of how strategic goals may trickle down into balanced scorecards, master plans, right down to that floor management system. A working understanding of that is critical, just so you can hit the ground running in essence. The second one is personal digital skills. So this kind of touches on the last question as well. We have some members that have come and instructed on the program with McMaster, sharing, for example, that 30 to 40% of tasks within a business are manual and repetitive. So we now have off-the-shelf solutions that non-IT members can bring to bear to a business or organization or work center to mitigate and reduce that number. So you can be gaining 2 to 3 hours worth of work per shift, for example. So that's a huge advantage. The third area I would focus on is communication and interpersonal skills. So we've had, especially in this environment, business leaders have to drive plans, and ultimately they have a harder ask to pose their maybe already stressed workforce. They're trying to scale up post a pandemic. They're dealing with shortages right now. So leaders are having to have much harder asks of their members. So we've even had members with writing, and even a poet, for example, join us on the last course, who's also an executive coach that instructs storytelling and gaining buy-in from your audience and retention. That's definitely an important skill set we're seeing. And the last one I'll say is really, again, what we just talked about, and Bill was sharing some light on that too, was that bottom-up decision-making. So we recently had a speaker on the program joining us from BAE Systems, sharing his insight, and he shared an image where a research study was done, and they found that about 4% of the actual issues at the shop floor level were visible at senior leadership and the strategic leaders level, whereas about 100% awareness is present at the frontline workers itself. So that's the audience that's best equipped to drive change and continuous improvement. So bottom level 1, level 2 leaders being able to craft simple business cases that can arm their mid and strategic leaders, that's definitely an important skill set.
Thank you, Sean. That's a lot to take in on all the variables. So I understand it's a pretty complicated situation, and it's constantly evolving. With regards to questions for workforce, it's clearly changed over the last few months versus last year. And so keeping all of these variables in mind, Joe, as a business owner, what are the main workforce threats that you are facing, and how are you addressing this constantly changing landscape?
So I first off, I have to agree with almost everything that Ashan said, especially around the ask for employees through these times. I live it every day. But in general, if you asked me this question 6 months ago, I would have given you a complete different answer. And it shows that how fast things are changing in this new environment. I was just on a webinar recently about employee retention, and they shared the metric that in 2021, 24% of people had the intention of looking for a new job. And now in 2022, that number has grown to over 40%. So you can see how fast things have shifted. It's definitely an employee's market right now, meaning there's more jobs than qualified people, or companies cannot find unqualified people willing to grow and learn in these different roles. You may have heard the terms, the Great Resignation or the Great Realization. Essentially, as we transition to potentially going back to office, people are looking for more of a work-life balance, and that's what these times have really shown us. And people are looking for that flexibility. They've had a taste of that life, and now they want that to kind of continue. So one of the things that we're working on is the whole working virtually versus in person, and how do you strive to build company culture at the same time? And ultimately, you're going to need a balance between the two. And as I said, people are looking for these jobs now in the market, which allow them to work from home full time. There's the other side of the spectrum, as I mentioned, where people prefer that human interaction or that face-to-face interaction. So companies are starting to offer hybrid models, including my company as well. But you can't lose sight of what the team and organization ultimately need to be successful. There are many solutions to introducing this flexibility into the workplace, and that's something that companies are adapting and modeling as time passes and continuing to change. As I mentioned, things are moving so fast now and changing so quickly that these models often have to be changed. These new times have also changed the way that the market reacts, so people are more hesitant to move roles. Sourcing employees has definitely taken much longer. Because the market isn't as strong, it results in companies offering more money to get employees to leave their jobs. In addition to the financial aspect of it, fulfillment, progression, and challenge are also things to consider for employees. So people are looking for the opportunity to become better, and that's the topic of conversation here, upskilling and reskilling. So ultimately, these employers need to create environments where you have the combination of upskilling and reskilling. They're absolutely essential. And I'm so personally passionate about this point, even where I'm at in my career now. So from an employee standpoint, you definitely need to be adaptable. You can't expect to be just an expert at one thing nowadays. And as a business leader, I'm really looking for people with these stronger, softer skills. It's great to have that technical background and technical aptitude, which I feel allows people to be able to learn anything technical related, but those strong soft skills are absolutely key nowadays. And lastly, in order to mitigate the impacts of everything that's going on, we're really looking more internal and focusing on things like succession planning and promoting from within the company, where you can start off, let's say, in an engineering role, and then essentially funnel to every other role within the organization.
Thank you, Joe. That's broad spectrum of things to consider. Obviously, the cultural shift on people's expectation for work and their work-life balance, and having a lot more flexibility. But I'm really keen in on your focus on the growth within an organization and upskilling, and enabling workers and employees to expand from where they are or to do other things. Keeping that in mind, Bill, with the transitory workforce, what key skill gaps would you say employees should upskill in order to be able to enable sustainability initiatives within Canadian businesses?
Going to Joe's point, you certainly have to be adaptable. Like I've been working now for 30 years, and most of the things that I'm doing now weren't even part of my educational process. So you're changing and continually learning. To deliver sustainability, you need a foundation in strategy, planning, change management, and it's beneficial to have an analyst mindset and understand the data, be able to analyze that information that you've got. To me, one of the biggest areas that we really don't think of from the engineering side is the soft skills. You're working with people, skills that can be used anywhere. Technical issues you can always learn over time, but it's really key to be able to work with people, work in teams. The best solutions that you're going to get is when we work together as a group. You'll get different perspectives from different people. We're going to bring different ideas to the table than any one individual ever will. They'll come with something that somebody else didn't think of, and it doesn't matter where they are in your organization. They see something that you have not thought of along the way. So it's important to open that up to everybody within the organization. They all have a contribution certainly to make. So again, I'll go back to the soft skills and having that analytical ability. Technical issues, you can learn those along the way.
Thank you, Bill. So what I'm picking up from basically on these three broad subjects is really that, the empowerment of like maybe middle and lower workplace employees, the ability to offer them the opportunities to expand and upskill, and really a focus on soft skills I guess bringing in employees that already have some of these technical skills to really expand into that soft skill going forward in the future is going to be pretty key for the employment landscape.
Yes, that's correct. Everybody's got a contribution to make, and will recognize different things and have things to bring to the table and continually improve their skills in their area. They've got to be part of the wheel, cog in the system.
Thank you. Those are the three main broad topics. We'll open it up for any questions. I see that there was a question dropped in a little bit earlier this is from Maha Ilaya. I apologize if I don't pronounce anybody's name correctly. The question was regarding, with regards to our discussion topic on sustainability. Maha want to know, what are the sustainability KPI? And I believe this is for Ashan, you had mentioned KPI. Can you explain more on the ways of measuring it?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Maha, for the question. It's a very interesting topic. So this was something that surprised me as well. I'll give you an example. The first thing that we've seen come from a few business leaders is just the need for awareness and tracking. So water and energy seems to be the biggest topic that we've been recently hearing from, and just even tracking. So for example, some of the solutions that Joe's company offers, just to understand how much energy usage on site, and then deriving that down to work centers or bays or departments, for example. And that KPI, for example, energy or water, which might have been tracked, for example, with the facilities department, is now being tracked at the work center or the department level. And they will source multiple different solutions to mitigate that number, for example. We've seen use of chemicals as well, the amount being used, for example, in finishing on particular assembly products to try to reduce the amount of chemical used to still meet that same effect. We've seen things right down to the screen time. So displays going to sleep mode, for example. If you're working in an office building with thousands of computer screens, that can have a huge impact on energy and waste. I've even seen from the recycling point of view, where businesses have very strong recycling programs, and each department has a KPI for that. So instead of it being a passive discussion now, you'll see those pillars: safety, quality, productivity, but you'll also see environmental or sustainability itself, and the exact same targets derived from director level balanced scorecards, top 3 problems and solutions being conducted as part of continuous improvement. But it's now a structured part of the daily and routine meetings. It's not a subheading under some other pillar. It's now, we're seeing that transition. I hope that that clarifies that question.
And Maha, if it doesn't, feel free to pop on any additional or follow-up, or raise your hand to ask it verbally.
Perfect.
Maha says thanks. We have another question from, I think, Matthew Hamilton. And his question is, what do you think the big problem is in engineering right now? The fact that there's not enough jobs, or there's not enough workers? I assume this means skilled workers, and why? I'm going to throw this out to Joe.
Yeah, no problem.
I'll throw this out to Joe on I think you brought up the issue of not having enough skilled workers in order to be able to hire and fill in the jobs that are out there right now, and that's a bit of a struggle for business owners.
Yeah, absolutely. I think throughout the pandemic, a lot of companies had to change. As Ashan mentioned, the ask for the employees was greater. So right now, what we're seeing is it's really an employees market. So there's more jobs than qualified people. And essentially, the employees have their pick of the pack. So it's become a little bit more difficult as an employer to hire those type of people because they're often gone very quickly, or being hired for much higher rates of financial return.
So I don't know if that addressed Matthew's question, but I see that, Joe, that you brought up that there's, I guess, the competition is pretty high for poaching skilled work. And so the shortage of skilled workers is fueling I guess, the concern by employers in order to be able to fill in all the gaps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, sorry, Matthew was specifically referring to engineers, not skilled workers.
Yeah, still the response from my side. I mean, we are an engineering company. The vast majority of people that we have in our company are engineers. So I would say in general, what we're seeing within our organization, competitors or even other companies that we work with in the industry is they're struggling from the same thing. Finding those engineers or technical or skilled people to fill the roles that they have within their organizations.
I can certainly add to that as well, Tanuja, from the workforce lens.
Please do, yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, so just to echo what Joe was saying, so we've been following the metrics, especially in Canada, over the last 6 to 9 months. Indeed, job postings, they just released a report in the first quarter of 2022. I don't remember off the top of my head how it segments down to, for example, the engineering classification, but I believe in Ontario, Canada alone, we're at about 50% of manufacturing jobs as a whole not being filled right now. So, and I believe even Flo's still on the call, he could probably speak to that in more detail. So we have shortages right across the board, and multiple business leaders have had discussions about, they call them lateral job trajectories, basically in line with what Joe was speaking to. So not just jumping into, for example, an engineering role, but members wanting to move across silos. And that's a huge tool because there's multiple businesses still needing that engineering skill set as well. And we just can't fill them right now.
Okay, Matthew, I hope that answers your question. And as previously stated, if not, feel free to drop it in the chat or raise your hand. We have another question from Maha. And the question is, do you still think of hiring even if someone doesn't have the hard skills, as in you can hire and train? I guess the reverse of hiring somebody with the hard skills and then training them up on the soft skills. Is there now consideration for hiring those that may not have the hard skills and training them up to meet companies' needs?
I mean, I can definitely jump in. It's not an issue. For me, as I mentioned when I spoke, for me, the soft skills are most important. If you have that technical background and technical aptitude, my thought is you can learn essentially everything. It's the soft skills that are most important. Finding someone that's willing to work hard, that's organized, that has good communication skills. So those are really the key things that I focus on. And again, every business leader is different, and it's always a conversation, even with me and my leadership team, is, you know, do we hire someone that has no experience coming straight out of school, or someone with the experience that you have to offer a little training to? And there's definitely different perspectives. I have my personal opinion, which is I would love to hire people coming out of school and train them up, and again, use that promotion from within to funnel throughout the organization. But again, every business leader has a different perspective on that topic.
Yeah, and just to add to that, especially Joe, and even Tanuja, you're familiar with this as well. Maha, the soft skills are the most alarming, the gaps that we're seeing right now. To give you an idea, on the leadership program we run at McMaster, we do an initial assessment on leadership skills. And we've had a few grad students that have had to come back to us and say, I've never led this, or I've never operated in a team doing this. Those have raised more red flags than I don't know how to use this software, or I am not familiar with this program. And partly to that topic is, within businesses, there are already training solutions for hard skills. You can enroll a person in a course or a program, but trying to enroll them in a program to teach the soft skills, that takes a lot of time and resources. So leadership, operating under stress, planning, factor analysis, communication, strong interpersonal skills, that's been one of the biggest red flags. And I'm seeing the follow-on questions on the chat. So you decide based on the interview. So I'll maybe pass that to Joe or Bill when it comes to how they decide to assess soft skills from the interview side of things. But there's a variety of tasks. This plays into the collaboration between academia and industry. For example, at McMaster, we're looking at a lot of different solutions to quantify soft skills, the leadership, the operations, the execution, and provide that as visibility to employers. But yeah, I'll maybe pass it over to Bill or Joe for the interview on the resume question.
I think I'm going to probably reiterate the same points as Ashan and Joe, but certainly attitude, interest, enthusiasm is a big role. Like, we've all worked in situations where we've got a team, and it can be a very functional team, or it can be at times even toxic, and it doesn't take much to push it across that threshold. So again, going back to the personalities and how that person's going to fit in a group situation is really, really important. So in terms of hiring, certainly interview portion of it does have a bearing. Sometimes people interview well, sometimes they don't. But checking on references, sometimes even bringing somebody in and test driving them for a little while and seeing how they work in a situation before fully integrating them into an organization. You get to see how they perform as well. And yeah, it's extremely important to see how they're going to work with the group. So again, those soft skills are really, really critical.
And then the interview portion for me is so important. I know some people interview well and some don't, but you know, I always say within the first couple minutes of interviewing someone, I know whether I love you or not. And it comes down to that soft skills and personality, and just being able to talk to someone despite the situation that you're in. The resume is certainly important and will take part in the screening process, but that first interview where you get the ability to kind of showcase why you're different than some of the others, that's where that would really stick out. But as Ashan mentioned as well, that soft skills, I see a really big gap right now in the market, surprisingly.
I think we've addressed what Maha wants to know. We have another question from Ji Lee. Why is it harder to train soft skills versus hard skills? I think you guys have touched on a little bit, but maybe Bill, if you want to expand on your point, and we'll go from there.
And it's a bit of a tough one, but it sometimes comes down to a person's personality or upbringing, whether they're outgoing or introverted. So it's a hard one. Like, you can learn things certainly from courses and so on, but you almost have some of those soft skills imprinted or ingrained in that individual as well. So it's not that you can't improve and learn different things, but some of it's almost genetic, for the lack of a better word.
Maybe a bit more of a behavioral practice, which is much harder to incorporate on day-to-day life, if I understand what you're saying, Bill, versus a hard skill is figuring out and knowing the processes to go through with a certain system, versus actually changing a behavioral reaction and a response.
Pretty much hit it on the head.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other points to add on to that?
Yeah, I'd love to add to that. That's a great question, Z. So from my experience, especially from the training level 1, level 2 type leaders, the biggest enabling mechanism for mastering a soft skill is experience. And unlike let's say an academic program, it's strictly based on a credential or the instruction and hard gate of a test. That is a great mechanism to assess a hard skill, a competency. But when you're trying to maneuver a new learner to master leadership, confidence, communication skills, executing under stress, being able to drive a rapid factor analysis on the top of your head and inspire others, that takes experience. So you have to, and catered experience, you have to shape their learning itself in a safe environment where they can make those mistakes, where they can feel vulnerable, and then let them progress through each stage. This is something that's at the fundamental backbone of our ongoing conversations within McMaster to address and enable, especially the grad student level. But that's really the core of it. It's that experience level, which you can't mass produce, can't put 300 people on a Zoom call and build that experience for each individual member. So those are some of the challenges, but it's absolutely critical. And that's where the conversation in the development field has been going.
So we're running pretty close to time on this. I'd say when it comes to soft skills, one of the things that may benefit, and Ashan, you correct me, is ensuring that you get yourself a mentor that can help you guide through some of these soft skills at development throughout your career, or at the start of your mid-career, at any point, to identify a few mentors to take you through and navigate. The panelists.
Yeah, I absolutely, I believe it. You saw it in my my introduction, but mentorship is huge. It's worth its weight in gold. But yeah, I'd love to pass over to Bill and Joe, who are reaping the rewards of that effect. Right, that's what we do.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything you just said.
You can't be afraid to make mistakes either. So don't hold back. Like, that's how we all learn. Like, all of us have fallen into several pitfalls along the way. So you have to make those. That's how you're going to adjust, and that's where your experience comes in, as Ashan refers to. If you hold back and don't try something and don't push your limits, you're not going to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see the question from Maha. I don't know, Marianne, I'm not sure if there's someone from OSPI that could answer the mentorship question. I definitely know from our end, we have a mentorship program heavily geared towards industry on the McMaster. Obviously, Tanuja is one of them as well. So happy to engage on any questions on that. But yeah, if there's anyone from the OSPI team that could answer that.
There was just a message put in by the OSPI team for an email that can be reached out for that. We are pretty much out of time. So I'm going to pass this. Thank you very much to all the panelists, Bill, Joe, Ashan, for this great discussion. I'm going to pass this on to Flo to close us off.
Thank you, Tanisha. Well, thank you to everybody who was attending this event. Thank you for participating. It's important because it's for you. It's always nice when we see some level of interaction. It means that we are doing a very decent job. We hope you have enjoyed it. If you have any questions, feel free to connect at any time with the team. We would like also to thank OSP, so the Ontario Society of Professional Engineers, for organizing NEM this event. And lastly, a very special thank you to all of the NEM partners, as they are on the slides. And please join us for the next NEM events. There is a calendar on the website. You can check it out at nemontario.ca, where there's a complete listing for all events for this month. Again, thank you for everybody. Feel free to reach out anytime, and have a good day.